Sit down. Helen, sit. Good girl. Good girl. All right. We got a little fire going. We got a little spot for Halo to sit and lick my face. What we're making today is called Bannock. It is a very, very old recipe. The Scotch and Irish settlers in Canada and North America were the ones to bring it over, and that's where we get the name from, is they had a flatbread back in Ireland and Scotland that was called Bannock. It was used extensively by trappers and voyageurs in Canada and in America, all throughout the early exploration and settling of America. The Native American tribes had their own version of Bannock. Most tribes had their own version of Bannock, even before settlers came. Theirs was usually ground camas bulb or acorns or cattail roots, things like that. Corn was also used, but the European settlers brought grains. And so what we are going to be making here is a couple of recipes as the settlers would have made them. One is going to be an oat bannock without leavening, as they would have made it back in the days of the exploration. And then the other one is going to be a more modern version of the bannock, such as you would make at a Cub Scout cookout or just camping by yourself. The first recipe that we're going to be doing is the old style bannock. I have here some lard. I have a bag of oat flour, and I have some salt. That plus water is all you need to make bannock. Put the lid back on that because otherwise it's going to be full of snow. We're going to melt our fat in order to be able to actually integrate it into the flour because it's hard as a rock. No surprise there. I'm going to mix in I've got about a cup of flour here, and I'm going to mix in a little over half a teaspoon of salt. I don't want it to be too salty. The water is freezing as we speak. It is probably around 10 degrees right now. And we're just going to knead the fat into the flour until it forms little pebbles or is otherwise well integrated. Besides the introduction of grain flour to the whole flatbread party that the Native Americans had going on, the only thing that the settlers really can claim to have changed about the Bannock is the introduction of fat into the dough before cooking, which does make for a much more tender bread. And now we're going to add some water. Probably too much. It's definitely too much. It's fine. It'll be a little bit flatter than usual. There's not a whole lot of precision in this process. A thicker dough is more traditional. You want it to be kind of like a biscuit, which this is actually coming together more like a biscuit. You just want to make sure there's no also want to make sure your fire doesn't go out. You want to make sure there's no clumps of unmoistened flour in here, otherwise it's going to be very odd. And once it's come together, at least as well as can be expected, form it into a patty. And slap it on your pan or griddle or whatever you got going on. And then wash your hands with snow. You don't have to have a pan to cook Bannock either. You can take that dough and wrap it around a clean stick and cook it over the fire like a hot dog if you want. It does tend to take on the flavor of whatever stick you wrap it around. And obviously if you don't peel the bark off, it'll also take on some of the bark. So maybe not the ideal way to cook it, but if you don't have a pan and you want some hot bread, there is an option for you. What a lot of people do when they're cooking Bannock is they will par cook it like this, and then instead of just flipping it over, they'll take the pan and lean it up in front of the fire for the top half to cook. Personally, I don't see an advantage to that over just turning it over. But again, that is the traditional way of cooking it. My pan is hot enough that I don't need to leave it directly over the fire anymore. While that cooks, let's go ahead and make our second recipe of the day. This is the version of Bannock that you would probably actually prefer to eat. Regular all-purpose flour. Salt to taste, and wonder of the ages, baking powder. There's about a cup of flour here, so I'm going to do a teaspoon-ish of baking powder. Flour mixed in good, and then somehow without burning myself or the plastic bag, get the fat in there. Success. Once again, get the fat mixed in as well as you can into the flour before you add your water. Because this is leavened, it is going to make a much, much lighter dough. Not nearly as dense and hard tacky. More of our rapidly freezing water. And form this into another little puck. Thank you, Halo. You're being very helpful. Very helpful indeed. Well, if you want me to throw you something, bring me something bigger than this. Yeah, maybe it's not the best idea, Halo. You can already see this was the same thickness as that when I put it down, and it's more than doubled. Baking powder. Alright, this one works. Let's take off the fins, make it fly farther. Went right by it, Halo. Heat management really is the difficulty in campfire cooking. And it's difficult to smell when it might be getting a little bit toasty because, well, everything's on fire anyway. How's it going, Halo? You didn't find the stick. There's a lot of snow. It is a problem. You're right. I can't really do anything about the snow. It was a valiant effort. Alright. I'd say that the oat Bannocks are done. I'm going to take those and put them right there just to cool for a minute. Maybe I'll put them over here where Halo can't get to them quite as easily. Let's taste test the oat unleavened Bannock first. It is very flat, very dense, and that is actually surprisingly good. I've never made unleavened Bannock before, and I think it's because of the oat flour. It has a delicious nutty flavor. It's got just the right amount of salt, and it's not, because it's oat, it doesn't have any gluten in it, so it's not ridiculously chewy. That's extremely good. That's delicious, actually. Maybe I oversold the wonders of baking powder after all. It's obviously very dense, but because there's no gluten, it's not chewy. It just, and because of the fat in it, it's not dry either. It's just, it's a moist, soft, surprisingly, very flavorful bread. It's excellent. I love it, actually. I think I may start making this version more often. Obviously, it's not something you can make a sandwich out of. And it's not a particularly good delivery system for other foods, but you don't even really need butter on that. A little bit of jam and this would be absolutely amazing. This is the leavened Bannock, and you can see exactly how much thicker this is compared to the unleavened. They were the same thickness when we started. The leavened bannock, because the fat is rubbed into the dough before you add the liquid, the texture isn't really like you would think. It's not like a pancake, even though it's cooked in a pan. I would say the texture is much closer to a biscuit, or maybe a scone. It is also very good, but it lacks the nutty flavor. That the oat bannock had. I will say though that because this does have gluten and because it is leavened, you could split this in half and use it as a. You could split this in half and use it to make sandwiches out of. It's a lot more functional of a bread than the oat bannock is. The oat bannock is kind of just, you have to have it on its own or with a spread or something. It's not as useful in various situations as this is, but this is also very good. And indeed is the version that I usually make. But that oat bannock, that was surprisingly delicious. I'm gonna make that more often. I hope you enjoyed this little cooking video. I know I enjoyed making it, and I'll see you next time on the Alaska channel.